Okay,
and go.
As sure as the sun rises in the east, it also sets in the west, people. And this is episode 37 of the Confessions podcast. We are back for another week. I am your co-host, Chris Sweeney, otherwise known as The Alchemist, and we are going to bring him right in. The man that can see around corners. The acid capitalist, Mr. Hugh Hendry. How are you?
I'm bathing in the new studio lights in the bunker. Last week I had my DJ headphones, and I was talking into the mic, but the mic wasn't turned on. And last week, of course, you were just yelling. I mean, you are the alchemist. You yell at the audience. And yes. I'm a little bit more considered. So hopefully we've reconciled levels, and hopefully I will not have to spend 8 hours. But last week we improv'd, and I never really cut much. So you saw the labouring of the burden of the nonsense that I carry in my head.
The raw footage, exactly. And did you have a good week, Hugh?
I have to say yes, of course. But yeah. I've just. Money. We're going to talk about money. What is money? And there are big, this whole awful, grotesque stain on humanity with Russia and Ukraine, and the stain is Russian, has brought up this PhD type silly nonsense about what is money? Tangible versus intangible. I mean, our money system today is like the Love Cult 2000. I mean, it's just made up. It exists because we believe. It has no intrinsic value. But with Russia insisting on payment in rubles and then saying that its currency is backed by oil, so oil being a commodity, this hard, enduring thing, they're not making any more of the damn stuff. You see the value is shooting up. And there's this debate, is Putin, is he the master wizard? Is he kind of seeing the future? Let me tell you, people, he ain't a wizard. He's an evil bad guy. We're going to stop him. But again, we'll come back to that. And yeah, we're definitely going to touch upon that, because hard money, this money that supposedly you touch and you have it in a bank vault, and then it supports deposits and lending and vitality in the economy. People who've been there. Like, people used to wear fancy hats, silly costumes. They spoke in a different language. Been there, doesn't work. And I'm going to take you through some of those adventures. Actually, I say adventures. Mostly they're misadventures. And then we might even talk about Bitcoin.
You never know. But I'd like to kick off with our old friend, Chris Hone. Now, he is big-time hedge fund manager, for anyone who doesn't know, but I'm sure everyone on this podcast knows because mentioned a few times. Very big returns. But there was an article about him in the Institutional Investor, and it highlighted the fact that Chris has a philanthropic element to his hedge fund. He gives 50 basis points to charity. And he was talking about essentially that it was his wife's idea. And she said, he was talking about his wife, and he said she was against starting a fund just to make money for myself. She said if you did the philanthropic pledge publicly, it would encourage other people. Currently, he manages $42 billion. So he's obviously very popular. Now, Hugh, is his philanthropic side thing, the fact that he's given this money away to the Children's Fund, does anyone care, or are investors just wanting cash? Is it really part of his attraction?
It's complete blinking nonsense. Okay, but no, it's complete blinking nonsense in terms of it's an article. I think that article you shared it with me. It's an Institutional Investor. Institutional Investor is top tier. You've made it when you've got an article by Institutional Investor. Big resources, big article. I bet it reaches like 10, 12 pages, and they deep dive, and it's typically thorough and analytical. That thing's just preposterous. What hedge fund of funds and pension funds, etc. Their DDQ is, what is DDQ? DDQ used to be the blight of my life. I can't even. Thankfully, my life has changed so much. I don't know. Write in. Tell me, what does DDQ stand for? DDQ is the questionnaire that all managers have to fill in terms of doing a beauty parade to encourage due diligence. Thank you, Chris.
Due diligence. Yes. No problem. No problem. Internet. Google to the rescue.
Alchemist is on it. The due diligence. Prominent within the DDQ is not the charitable donations. But I, however, would not want to make light of Chris sharing the profound spoils of his endeavours with causes, albeit I think we have mentioned Chris before, and I think he underwrites the insanity of Extinction Rebellion. And if that's... Yeah.
Yes, he does.
My God, Chris.
I think he's their single biggest donor. I think he's their single biggest donor.
You wouldn't imply donor.
No, donor. Donor. Single biggest donor.
Is he a stoner? Because it makes no... Chris, give me a call. I've shared a platform with everyone, but I'm a bit like everyone does it once, and then never, what does it say in Hollywood? Never share the screen with animals, kids, and Hendry. But I remember getting invited to it's one of these, but it's all the Wizard of Oz, and it's all it's not riddles, it's all. It's the red rope. I was invited to this thing, which was it's a secret. Like no one gets invited to this. It's the best money providers, the guys who write checks of $100 million plus. Can you come? I'm like, sure. 8 hours BA economy or whatever, and I'm there, and Chris comes in on the private jet, and. God almighty, just so boring. Just unbelievably boring.
It's not very Extinction Rebellion if he's using private jets. That doesn't seem to chime with
That's a very good point. There was an amazing quote, not by me, but from my monthlies. The George Bush is an asset capitalist.
George W. Bush, not George Bush. George W.
God loves the W.
What's he? W. Number 43, right? 43rd president. Is that correct? Am I?
No
42nd?
Don't care.
Who cares?
What did he say?
Who cares? Anyway, he said in Hugh's monthlies, our problems in America get solved when we aggressively go for domestic exploration. If we expand our refining capacity, promote nuclear energy, and continue our strategy for the advancement of alternative energy as well as conservation. That was in the Eclectica Monthly from May 2008. And so basically George W. Bush is an asset capitalist. He's part of the Hugh Henry tribe. I'm just texting him now.
George, we're just talking about you now. I'm putting my clock indicator so I don't go over. So W wasn't writing exclusively for the Eclectica investment letter, but his words had leapt out from the printed page and had made an impact on my kind of magpie. I was, if you will, flying metaphorically, flying through the meta universe with all of these thoughts, and occasionally I'd see shiny objects, things which words and text which attracted me and kind of created kinks in my universe, and I'd collect them, and then I'd try and find a home for them at the end of the month. And that was one of them. But just think of that. I mean, it's so ahead of its time. And think of where Germany would be today if they had not this disastrous policy of committing to the closure of their nuclear power. This disastrous policy of just committing more and more and more to what was, I'm going to say cheap, and I stuttered with cheap because cheap is one of these graveyard words. More harm or more self-harm has been done with this valedictory term of cheap. Cheap, if you were to, cheap is this metric used in equities and typically applies to low price earnings ratios. Right? In a bond, that it gets the word junk or high yield. And the high yield's a better metric because the yield's actually saying, hey, listen, we're offering you a lot of compensation because actually this is very risky. This is a dangerous proposition. The certainty of what happens next is very, very modest. So take care. And that was the swamp and the trap that the Germans fell into, because here they could tap and access cheap oil and gas from Russia. And now we're discovering why it was cheap. There was no certainty, and there was clauses, and there was indeed a profound amount of risk that came from creating an exposure to this cheapness. And of course, we're doing this podcast the week where the valiant Poles have stood up and said, we ain't paying your rubles. Cut us off if you want. And there you have the timid and the cowardly Germans, and I suspect the Italians, who will for sure will feed the blood machine.
Well, I mean, one already has, just to jump in there, Hugh, one already has, because Uniper is one of Germany's biggest energy firms, said that it's going to do it. It's going to pay in rubles. It's going to send the money. It's going to pay euros or dollars into an account at Gazprom Bank, the Swiss trading arm of Gazprom, and then that will be converted into rubles in a Russian account. So they're going to do it. They say they've got no choice, and they're still abiding by EU sanctions.
Again, that's
doing
it. The most hideous things happen to you when someone says, "I got no choice." I remember being denied entry to a restaurant during the insanity of the alien body invasion, and the guy's like, "Ugh, Jadot, I love you. I know you're good. But I got no choice. I can't let you in without your passport." And you could take that further into more and more extreme, the chambers of horror which visit us in war times, and the refrain is always, I'm sorry, I didn't have any choice. You always have a choice, and the choice is staring at Europe. Europe has a choice. It can take out like a 5%, which is not to be dismissed. That's profound. That's huge. That's kind of like 2008 great financial crisis territory. That is the oil price crisis, which happened twice in the 1970s. So these are 5% GDP, real GDP declines would merit like the stamp, if you will, of like the deepest recession since the Second World War kind of territory, and they're not to be underestimated. But surely it's better to take that economic cost than actually to find in 2 or 3 years' time that you're spending 5% of GDP on tanks and planes and the mobilization of your civilian workforce and turning them into the military to defend your eastern flank. I mean, it just, the Europeans have shown a lack of foresight 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and sadly that shadow of blindness is with us today. But, this isn't a political show.
No, but what I was going to say was, I mean, it's really interesting what you're saying there, but if they do decide to say, right, we're going to take the hit, we all know it's April, start of May, we're getting warmer climates, so we can obviously cut down a bit on the thing. But, I mean, if gas goes off, especially countries like Germany and Italy, I mean, they're so dependent on the Russian gas, you worry people might not be able to heat their homes so by the time we get to like, December, when it gets colder, are you playing sort of the game of, will Putin be gone if we cut off now? And if he hangs on, are we going to be in a worse position in 6, 7, 8 months down the line?
For sure, the risk is that Putin is still there in the winter months. For sure, he's there if you do nothing. For sure, he's there if you pay rubles. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you stand up and you say, "Hey, we're not taking it. This is blood. We're not supplying you with our money. Done." Okay. I think you enhance the probability that he can't make it. Remember, like not all, but this is like an oil and gas based economy. All of their money. I mean, every other industrial activity. Okay, they do some wheat, but everything else is all the money they're earning is coming from oil and gas. And at the same time, so let's say they succeed in God help us, in securing Ukraine. They're destroying Ukraine. So they will end up being responsible for a population of 40 million who will need social security payments and bailouts. They will have to rebuild all of these cities at trillions of dollars, and they will be cut off from the world. And without oil and gas payments, they could, I mean, that's their Achilles. They don't exist without Europe, especially the Germans and the Italians, paying them. Like, if they walk away from it, it's a game changer. It's all over. So, and in terms of, but they do present this, oh, but these old ladies they'll be so cold, and the babies will be really cold, and it'll be snowing outside. These are the same people that are cutting off nuclear, right? And Chris Horn, the what's it called? Extinction Rebellion. That's what happens with the Extinction Rebellion, right? Because we don't have the technology today to light up homes and to heat homes without hydrocarbons. But Chris Horn and his Extinction Rebellion law, they're like, hey, take it today. Cut it today. Cut the dependency today. And it's fine if you're a billionaire on a plane or a private jet, but for the people who are tapped into the national grid, when it comes to next November, December, January, March can be a cold month, Forget the Russians. That's Extinction Rebellion. But back to the German thing. Again, it's a fraud, because you, as a society, you got choices, and you could just say, hey, listen, the paramount importance is that we heat homes, okay, and therefore we're pulling the plug. We've got a hierarchy of strategic industries. There are some industries that we have to protect at all costs, but further down the line, if you will, like, I don't know, like making beer and the electricity required there, like, boom, we're pulling the plug, and that's, so no one would go cold, but you would lose jobs for a while. But you know what? In the absence of jobs, so there were no jobs, Chris. This kind of improvising it. There were no jobs during COVID. The government said, hey, go home. Stay at home, folks. Yeah. We'll pay you. Right. So,
we'll pay you to stay home.
Germany, the times are changing. Germany has this legally mandated requirement to balance its spending against its receipts, its tax receipts. They're going to change it. They've already said, yeah, forget it. That was the past. We need to build things. We need to green up the economy, etc. And that stood them really well during COVID. They paid people. Okay, so you got paid. So the same, I'm saying to you, this is another confrontation like the body snatching invasion, and the German government could pay people the difference. It's like, just have common blinking sense.
They need the acid capitalist in there. They need the acid capitalist. You could be the European central banker.
Yeah, this has been a big week on. Again, times are changing, people. They're changing. This is the... We need asset capitalists. You need crazy folk managing your money, because, like, let me tell you something. Chris ain't crazy. And that's why he's got 41 yards, Chris. 41 yards. That's, woo. It's the same amount of money, actually, which is in the Grayscale closed-end investment trust, which invests exclusively in Bitcoin. I don't know why I mentioned that. We will touch Bitcoin later. But 41 billion has gone to Chris because he's grey, dull, and safe and dependable. It's the same guy who lost 41% in 2008 when yours truly made 34. And actually, so his thing, that article, I think, was saying that he has no more than 13 stocks. He's running concentrated portfolios.
He's only got 13 stocks, and five stocks account for 2/3 of the portfolio.
Do you know who loves him? Think of last week.
Do I know who loves him?
Bill loves him. Bill's like, Chris is the man, because Bill's tried everything. I mean, like, with that beautiful hair and that scent, the scent of pine needles. Bill's tried everything, and he's like, okay, like we discussed, I tried a short Herbalife, it was a disaster. I tried to be long valiant, I lost $3 trillion of my $3 billion of my clients' money. I discovered Netflix in January 2022, like after the COVID. guys, I need a new strategy. And someone's like, well, Chris, Chris who? Chris Hunt. Tell me about Chris Hunt. Well, he manages 42 billion. Wow, I need to manage 42 billion. How does it? What's the secret? He's really dull. He's really boring. He's kind of like Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
He finds like 10, maybe 15 stocks. They're really safe. They've got these moats. They've got defensive characteristics that keep out the invaders, which means, like, again, when we talk, they're not cheap. Bill, they're not cheap. But that's a good thing, because remember, Valiant was cheap, and that ended up being a disaster, okay? So they're expensive, but that means they're more certain to make you money. So, like, Netflix, it's not cheap, but it's so certain to make you money. It's like, boom, I'm in. Bang, hit me. Buy me a yard. What else? And Chris is like that. He owns impeccable businesses. Visa, Microsoft, Alphabet, the owner of Google. He owns, what else does he have in there?
Canadian National Railway.
You can't go wrong with a railway. These are monopolies.
And Charter Communications.
Charter. What is Charter? Charter is cable, and I think that's down about 40%. I think Charter probably cost him 4 percentage points of NEV. So what I'm saying is, Chris is impeccable, right? We can say whatever we want about it because he's never going to hear about this show. But he's the kind of guy who goes, click, 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 click. Where am I? Am I over here? Am I over there? Click, 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 click. Boom! Down it. I swear, this is an environment you've got to bail on all these boring people. We've talked about, again, let's go scatology, but we ended last week on China and its currency. I've been proclaiming the dangers within the Chinese renminbi, and part of a trading strategy, we were talking about options on the currency. And so you'd be buying calls because I was prophesizing that at 630, 640, you need 630, 640 renminbi to buy $1. And I was saying I can foresee a world, like, you don't have to, like, it just has to go to 7 and you can make money. And because the price of these options is cheap. And with cheap, again, be careful, but this is more scientifically cheap rather than qualitatively cheap. There's a good distinction to be made there. In the sense that this actually is rewarding you potentially rewarding you quite a lot. But again, the cheapness is always a red flag. It's saying that cheapness tells you that the sum of all the best minds on the planet are saying it's unlikely that you're going to make money. But cheapness within that vernacular comes down to an analysis of volatility. And volatility is the degree of price variation from day to day, month to month, etc. And these price changes is the internet of stock markets. Is the digital binary code that underwrites all risk markets. When price variations of volatility goes into a channel, it forms a routine. Right, and investors change their behavior such that their behavior is appropriate to that routine. Yeah, and so the routine of late has been very low volatility, and so within that you take monstrously large bets if you're a hedge fund manager. And the reason again is I'm going to keep using this word volatility. Someone was telling me, like, you'll never succeed pretending that you're Iggy Pop and then like having a deep dive into option volatility. Like, these things are mutually not screw you. These things we can work these things together. Maybe Chris is like, I think you're like, I think he was right. Move on, edit. But hedge fund remuneration is all about volatility, and it's something that since the beginning, Chris. Like, we begin these charts with you saying, hey, Chase Manhattan the third, Chase Coleman the third. Chase Coleman the third. He just made $4 billion for his personal account. How is that blinking possible? Well, because of this crazy system. Like, you are incentivized, right? You get 20% of the up, right? So hit it. Like, just hit it with everything you've got. What's the worst that can happen, right? The worst that can happen is that happens in your first year, and it doesn't work for you. You burn the capital of clients, they fire you, and you never work again. Okay, so but you don't die, right? You might end up being a gardener. Yeah. You might discover horticulture really is your thing. I don't know. Air balloonist.
Or you might manage properties for rich people in St. Bart's.
Ooh, the alchemist is leaking acid today.
Which you don't actually do. But a few episodes ago, people, you may have remembered that Hugh was erroneously labelled as managing rich people's houses in St. Bart's by a rogue platform.
Yeah,
anyway, carry on.
It might not work, and so you don't have a 10-year life being a hedge fund manager, right? Or it works, and you make 5 yards. You make $5,000 million, right? So it's kind of evident, right? Which path are you going to take? Kind of like become a gardener, maybe, or make $5 billion. It's kind of self-evident, and like I said to you with that Chinese thing, where the pricing regime is changing. That was the excitement last week. We captured. I just caught it on my screen. This boom. We've had a 3% movement in the China. Keep up with me, people. We're back on the Chinese currency. The Chinese currency has had a 3% pop in like 10 days. And you're like, I thought we were talking about sexy, exciting things, and we're back to like 3%. There's nothing. Kathy loses that typically like before breakfast. Kathy Woods with her kind of suicide fun, but in the world currency cross pairs, like 3% is an enormous thing, right? So again with Chase, he's blowing up, right? So the old magic. What is the old magic? Massive leverage, concentrated portfolios, buying expensive stocks, right? With big moats and talking gibberish, right? And employing like 50 masters of the universe who are just guys and girls in suits who work long hours like everyone else does, But the secret sauce is the leverage and the concentration, and you're swinging for big numbers, right? And so. Coleman got a huge number in 2021. I think he made 40-odd%. 2020 or 21? 2020.
I think 2020, off the top of my head.
From October 21, he went on the slide, and then that's continued into the first quarter. Kathy's the same. Just sucking on the ball thing, just like hit me. I'm concentrated, I'm leveraged, and boom, it goes up, and she. You make the money, the clients pay it, leaves the client's account, goes to her account. She never has to repay it. It's the same for all of them.
But this leads me to two names. I think there's two names we have to discuss here, and I don't know how we'll do one at a time. We've got Gabe Plotkin, which is a hell of a name. Gabe Plotkin. I mean, that is a name. I've never heard that. I've never heard anyone called Gabe Plotkin before. Anyway, him and Bill Huang. But let's take Gabe. I've said his name about 20 times, so you must know what I'm talking about now. He is at Melvin Capital. Now, from what I understand, Hugh, essentially he had a bit of a bad time, and he decided to drop his high water mark, which, as you've explained to me previously, is essentially when you start paying out, when the hedge fund manager starts making money. They take 20% from the high water mark upwards. But he wanted to drop it, and his client said, "Oh no, you're not doing that." And then Gabe had to sort of get on his bike, do a bit of backpedaling, and he wrote to his letter saying, "I am sorry. I got this one wrong. I made a mistake. I apologise."
Yeah, I'm trying to give you an analogy. It's a bit like there are some flights of fancy that you can share with your clients, And then there's these kind of dark thoughts in your mind that you can think, but you can never share with the clients. Okay, and so the background story, Melvin and Cillian. It's no more preposterous than Chase Coleman III. But in this world of absurd names, this theatre of absurd names, he got to $13 billion. The distinction for him was that he actually was able to generate profits consistently from shorting stocks as well as being long. So there's a diversification of effort. You typically find most, and my experience bears this out, most hedge funds, shorting tends to be like a loss leader. It kind of steadies your ship. But in terms of being a calendar year source of profits, it just steadies your performance. There'll be months when you lose a lot from your longs and your shorts will make you, but you never realize those gains typically. So he was kind of distinct for, he was realizing gains from short positions, betting that stock positions would fall. And he got caught on GameStop. He was huge. I think he lost, again, I'm going to have to make these figures up, but Google will tell us he lost 3 yards. He lost $2 or $3 billion. Well,
they lost 53% of his 53% after betting.
Well, he was
against
managing $13 billion, so actually he lost more. Remember, GameStop went up something like 200-fold, and one of the reasons was because there was a giant whale. Gabe was in there with being short $4 billion worth. So you can imagine. So he needed some emergency funding from his mates in the whole circle of billionaires. And he gets to the end of the year. He rallied a little bit. So I think for the year, maybe he was down 37. So he clawed back some of the gains. But, he'd just been found lacking. So the point being, he would, given if his magic was to come back and he was to make money with the cadence, with the frequency, with the magnitude that he had done previously, and that's a huge if. It would probably require 3 or 4 years before he would be in a position to take a profit, to take a performance fee from the existing investors. And so his worry, and again, this is like the German politicians and their worry about, the cold old ladies in their properties. It's complete fiction. His worry is that he would be commercially put at a disadvantage because how on earth could he support and pay the remuneration on his talented staff pool? And so wouldn't it be better if he reset, whereby if he made money like this year, it's like, hey, why
20%?
Don't we just pretend last year GameStop?
Never happened.
Because I'm a billionaire, and like being a billionaire, you got to make more billions. And you could legitimately say, why don't you spend some of your billions and pay your staff, your talented staff? That's a good idea. It's preposterous. So that's why, with that in mind, Chris, who else were we talking about?
Well, the other name I mentioned there was our old friend Bill Hwang. We talked about him last year. I just think anyone that doesn't know about him or you can't remember him, he was the guy that had a family office, and he seemed to sort of he did he not lose? And it was at the shortest amount of time someone's lost that amount of wealth. He was worth he was worth billions, and then 2 days later he was worth zero. It was a pretty dramatic thing. There was a piece of Financial Times that went through all those things, and essentially he was the market, Hugh. He became not only the buyer but the market. He was doing the whole thing, and he just ran out of room. He got a margin call, couldn't meet it, and the whole thing went up in smoke.
And so, yes to all of that, and let's add some fun color, because he funded Kathy Woods. It's like this thing. People they're laughing. They're rich. You're poor, right? When they lose, they're like, "Hey, can we change the rules?" They should.
Do you think Bill? Do you think Bill has any money left, or because it was his family office? Do you think he really will be in a sort of a one-bedroom apartment in, I don't know, some rundown area of wherever he lives in America? Or do you think he'll have a bit squirreled away?
I mean, he's going to end up in a one-bedroom government custodial apartment
Facility.
I mean, I'm no lawyer, but it would like trying to get these guys on malfeasance, on ineptitude, etc. Like, you should have done better. It's really hard. That's a narrative. It's like, well, but it would seem, when one peruses the financial press on the thing, that he lied. It's kind of like, what is your position? Reveal your position, right? And that's a binary question. There's an answer to that question. It's a precise answer. You have definitive 10 billion yards, a long 10 billion yards, right? And definitively, he was always underestimating the true size. And so lying, you just have to. It's easy to demonstrate. It's like, well, we asked you this question. This was your answer. This is the reality. The deviation, we call that lying, and that has penitentiary obligations. So bills, and remember, he's a repeat offender. The world is intoxicated by these leveraged, concentrated money junkies. It's like, they'll forgive you, and they'll forgive you, and they'll forgive you, and they'll forgive you. It's got to stop. But actually, Bill is I thought of Bill this week, obviously with that news breaking, but Bill's not alone. So Bill's good copy, but the most salient feature about Bill is that it's just best in practice. That he was pursuing the strategy pursued by everyone on the street. He got caught. He got caught because he was bloody stupid. He was like, there's one thing to have balls the size of an elephant. If elephants, I don't know, maybe elephants have tiny balls. I don't know. Pigs, I believe, have got big balls.
Kangaroos. Okay. Kangaroos have got big ones. Kangaroo testicles.
Chris?
Well, I haven't held them, but I've seen people eat them. And I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Well, not in front of me. How they get celebrities to go in the jungle, and one of the things is to eat kangaroo testicles, and it's a good plateful. Let's put it that way.
Do a Google search. What is the circumference of a kangaroo testicle? And I will continue. So with Bill, and it came to my mind with Monday's trading this week, where Monday I was expecting not a black Monday, but a darkish Monday. The markets closed very poorly the week before, broke levels, which is to say we're making new lows on the year. Nasdaq down, I think 21, going on 22%, and more than that, the fact that the Chinese currency had that volatility explosion on its surface, and it moved, it had weakened 3% quite rapidly. Just like a meteorological report, the shipping news was looking kind of like, if I was a captain at sea, I would be battening down hatches. And then the remarkable thing was Monday, it was brilliant sunshine. People were rubbing on carrot juice to try and enhance their tan, etc. And I was just like, I don't get this. And then the bill news dropped, and I was like, of course, this is what happens. So people back in my day, they talked about the what did they call it? They called the plunge protection squad, and there was this notion. It was rank nonsense. There was this notion that there were public officials who would gang together from the Treasury and the Fed, and they would exercise some kind of unknown discretionary power whereby they could be buying or selling, principally buying S&P futures, large equity futures, at moments during the night, like when everyone was sleeping. You could come into very illiquid markets and come in with a huge presence and paint the tape. Like a market that was down, you could come in at, I don't know, like 3 o'clock in the morning with an enormous buy order. And when you came when people woke up, when they had their breakfast, when they got to their trading desk, it's a new world. Prices are up, and so people who would be spending the weekend ready to sell things would actually hit their trading desk and would find that they would be covering shorts. That was the kind of Monday. And what Bill's thing revealed was he was using all these contracts for difference. He was using every possible non-transparent means that your investment bank, prime broker, will provide you to hide your trail in the market. He had 70% equity ownership in individual names, but he was able to go into this opaque derivatives market and keep buying. The whole point was it's a game of bluster and confidence. As long as the next price tick is higher, the people who have all taken the red pills, they're in the slumber and they ain't going to do anything. So just your number one objective when you're Chase and Chris and all these junkies with their 40 billion yards and their lifestyles and their charitable contributions, but their concentrated portfolios, is you got to make sure the next price tick is higher. Bill was roguish, but he was kind of trained in that school, and he got caught. Monday was the day where clearly I think investment bank operators were saying, "Hey, look, let's just let's put some of these stupid contracts on in off-hour time." They turned the market around, but what Tuesday revealed was the shipping news is bad for the world. Tell me about kangaroo balls.
Well, I'm having a bit of trouble with kangaroo balls. Maybe they're not that big, actually. The pictures I'm seeing are not that big. But what I can tell you, maybe it's more interesting, is that kangaroos have 3 vaginas. So there we go.
Frankly, I'm underwhelmed. Anyway, where are we? Let's move on. Let's get this show back on track. Hey, supposedly we're talking about global macros. So if I was to recap, I'm saying I feel I have no desire to manage other people's money. I'll say that from the outset. But I would say that we're entering into, I think, a period, and the markets perform, especially the sell-off last week and then the Tuesday reversal again, especially the movement in the Chinese currency, especially the strength of the dollar, especially the news which just seems to darken with regard to Ukraine becoming more and more of a global conflict, with growing evidence signs that real hard economic data is weakening. How can I take this forward? Let's take it forward. So we're going into, again, commodities, and there's 2 strands to this. There's commodities as a means of underwriting and giving, if you will, that awful word, value or tangibility to money, and making our financial systems less like religious gatherings and more scientific. And at the same time, we can also go another way, and I'm going to go electrical the other way the first time, which is commodities. Why are commodity prices high? And putting that, let's do paradox, let's do juxtaposition. Let's see if we can have fun with words and sentences. The oil price is elevated because you Muppets have not been printing money. Okay, so why I say that again, that we've got high energy prices, we've got high food prices, we've got high prices because the central banks have not been printing money. They've not been accommodative. Thoughts, Chris?
Well, thoughts are that I'll think back to your monthly, which I was reading before we came on, and from April 2008, you were talking about your new best friend, George Magnus, and he had a quote saying, "Government should think ahead and encourage capital spending in energy, free agricultural trade, and promote farming technologies." And then you went on to talk about how that you believe that agricultural prices should be bid higher to provide the entrepreneurial farmer with a profit incentive to cultivate more challenging land with expensive resources. And you talked about how you had been to see a pioneering Kiwi farmers, and also you were over in Ukraine. You'd seen farmers that wanted to do modernisation of large-scale farming. So that's kind of what you were saying in 14 years ago, that we wouldn't have the issues now, would we, with all of our food and our basic needs shooting away up, obviously fueled by Ukraine, if you had listened to what George Magnus was saying and also what you were saying back then. It was another way of seeing around a corner.
It's a good starting point because governments have actually ever since just got in the way. So, we thought we were on the cusp of something, of modernity. The whole Malthusian thing that we won't be able to feed the planet, and here we are with 8 billion souls, and give or take, crazy Vlad, we seem to be able to do reasonably well. And it reflects very highly on human ingenuity. And you mentioned Kiwis. I was in Uruguay, and Kiwi farmers were selling dairy pastures at very high prices because their productivity was extremely high in New Zealand. And they were coming to a similar part of the world in terms of weather profile, Uruguay. And so the advantage of it being a dairy pasture was that you don't have to feed hay. You can eat grass all year round. It's one of these it gives you a cost advantage. And just remarkable, easy things like proper fencing, irrigation, not high tech in terms of raising commercial yields to feed a hungry world. And all that kind of fell by the wayside because stock markets collapsed, of course, at the end of 2008. And then March 2009, back to my point about the Fed and its lack of printing money has actually created the inflation. And that began March 2009, when they came out with this proposition of quantitative easing. They were going to print money. We were staring down the barrel of a depression, and they were willing to subvert that, to stop that happening. And if it required them to print money, then so be it. They would cross that. This was like uncharted territory, but they were willing to go there. And so to their eyes, they say, we haven't had a depression. We have had a depression. So what happened was mining and agriculture, everyone in extractive industries, read newspapers, and all the newspapers said, you got to be in hard commodities because this spiritual, intangible money thing, they're printing more and more of it, and so it's going the way of the dodo. It's going to be valued at zero. So you've got to be in hard commodities. And so mining executives from 2009, they picked themselves up from the chaos of the previous years, and they invested hundreds of billions of dollars into new mines. And then by the end of 2012 or so, the Federal Reserve came out in 2013 and they started talking about quantitative tightening. They're like, job done. And now we think the economy's strong enough, and markets tightened interest rates very aggressively. Male adult unemployment was still trending at 7.5%, but 30-year mortgage rates were back at 4.5%. And so suddenly the economy just boom hit a wall, and all of that, literally $1 trillion of investment, was a disaster, and all of the executives responsible for those investments have been fired and been replaced by a younger generation today. And today, again, with Chris Hohn and the Extinction Rebellion, with this environmental lobby saying this is just morally, they're saying this is evil, you've got to stop it. There's this big break, but there's also a break because if we go into 2019, so in order to kind of housing and the multiplication of housing starts had been one of the great components of GDP growth in the years from 2000 to 2007 in the US economy. And so the whole explosion in the extractive oil industries when we were doing shale and the revolution there, this became one of the great spigots for US GDP growth. And US was on the verge of becoming the largest oil producer, energy producer in the world. I mean, incredible. This is, again, back to, tell me, what did George Bush say? Back in 2000, the George Bush vision was becoming a reality. And then what happened? The Federal Reserve again said, I think we're going to do quantitative easing. I think the economy is growing too fast. We're going to hike. They did hike rates. They went into this mini hiking cycle. The capital markets panicked. They pushed interest rates again into the proverbial sky, which was this huge break. And what happened? Like, the shale had been financed by cheap, that word again, let's get circularity in our arguments, which is to say junk or high-yielding credits, which were saying, this is kind of a bit whoopee-doo industry. It's kind of boom or bust. So we require like high compensation. When the feds came in and they did their vandalism cycle of like tightening into an economy that didn't require tightening, guess what happened? All of those revolutionary new businesses which were pumping gas and making America the largest energy producer in the world, they all went bankrupt. Okay, so fast forward into today, and no one's investing, Chris. Like, the yield on Rio Tinto, Rio's and Billiton are like two of the largest. These are diversified, gigantic mining businesses which straddle the worlds of copper, uranium, tiny amount, iron ore, you name it. They're one-stop shop. Huge monolithic groups. They're buying back their stock and they're paying dividends of like 12%. Okay. Remember last week I was saying to you, the greatest opportunities come when the experts, those who know the industry best, when they hate the business, you should be stepping in. And that's where we are with those commodities. But the reason those executives hate their businesses today is because of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve and other central banks, they're vandals. The Bank of England raising interest rates. How is that going to produce more oil? Like, remember the Germans are going to be really cold over the winter, right? If the ECB raises interest rates, how does that help the equation? What it's actually doing is it is preventing investment. So again, remember I took you through this process that we do. It's auction, and we're not selling off a Matisse. It's like, hey, listen, we need more oil because Russia's gone a bit bonkers, okay? And so you've got a shortage, okay? So we have to incentivize politicians and entrepreneurs and society to get together and work out a plan. And how we do that through our market-based economies is we push the price up. And that higher price will elicit innovation and response and risk-taking. Okay, because people are like, hey, $130, I can make money. I want to do that. But what's happening is, ever since 2008, we've had failure after failure after failure by the monetary authorities where they've seen demons, they've seen economic excess, and they have come in like blind rats, and they've run amok, and they've caused profound credit losses in those extractive industries. And so today, the US's production is rising, but it's frustratingly slow. Why is production of energy from the energy fields in America, why is it stuttering and not boom? With the oil price being so high, it should be boom. It should be escalating, accelerating. And instead it's like, it's like a mouse with a cigarette going, God, how many more steps I got to get to the top of this damn thing? And what's going on is like the capital providers, like, they're saying to the chief executive, if you invest in this business, I'm gonna kick your ass. I'm gonna put my stats in. I don't know why I'm talking like this. Don't do it. Don't make me have to shoot you. And like, no, don't shoot me. Don't shoot me. I'm now going into JR or Ewing and Dallas. Stop, pull the plug. But so we have this wanton vandalism, which is caused just by these policymakers just don't get it. Not even policymakers, people. There's only 5 people in the world that understand money, and they don't run central banks, sadly. So actually, the inflation that we're seeing, the elevation in prices from the commodity sectors, is here to stay, and it's a function of the incompetence of our policymakers.
But the journalist in me asks the question, because I've been seeing reports of the copper price, and lots of people are shorting it. There's 45,000 contracts at the end of last Tuesday, April 19th, or a few weeks ago, April 19th, that they are shorting copper. Now, am I understanding everything I read as a kind of a non-hedge fund manager? Everything I read and I hear about, everything's going up, commodities or prices are rising. Why would you be shorting copper? Is this surely copper is going to become the price is going to go up. Am I
Did you
missing
just call me?
something?
Did you just
Clearly,
call
I'm
me
missing
Shirley?
something.
Or did you use that word surely?
If you want, I'll call you anything at all. I'll slap your ass and call you Judy.
Surely not. The lame response to that. Well, it's not lame. Again, this tightening, this hiking of interest rates, like mortgage 30-year mortgage rate today in the US of America for a new loan is touching on 6%. All right, that's right. It's like, how many people do you think are like, hey, hose me down one of those babies when, 18 months ago it was less than half that. Activity is slowing.
Yeah.
And again, the COVID zero, whatever they're doing in China, their thing is on its ass. Like, if they're, think of all the copper that goes into buildings and building ghost cities and all that stuff. They ain't building it, so that's legitimate. But the asset capitalist would be buying lows. Things. You have a thing called a trend, and from A to B, so the Kathy Woods story again. Poor Kathy, but it's like, hey, look, if you invest at day one, I've made you money. If you point A to point B, right? I discovered this as a manager. You can't think point to point, right? The story and the genius and making money for people is trying to smooth out the journey, because there are times when you turn off the motorway too early, you're going in the opposite direction, you got to find your way back, no one speaks your language, the car breaks down. It's got a journey for a reason, yeah? And point A to point B doesn't show it. And actually what happens, because of the precarious nature of the journey, and the precarious nature is being shown by Chase Coleman's returns this year, and from last October by Kathy's returns, by Bill Wang vaporizing $35 billion in a day or 2 days. It's all around us. Netflix vaporizing $300 billion in a week, maybe. Boom. It's not capital. These are all things that cause you to kind of sell at low points, and then you're like, oh, bugger, and then you've got to come in and then you buy it when it recovers. So, you've got to harness all of that, and we are energy. We are energy, right? And you've got to harness that, and you've got to look at legitimate price weakness points. Like, this thing could go to the bottom of its trend. At the bottom of trends in commodities, if you ain't buying, I'm going to come round, I'm going to slap you on the forehead.
You've been warned,
now,
people.
Chris,
You've been warned.
So I said we could go two ways, and we've visited this paradox that actually the price inflation in the commodity cycle is a function actually of the failure of central banks to actually be accommodative and to use their vernacular to print money. And then I wanted to touch on this kind of existential question, but what is money? Because the nature of money has changed profoundly and really over a very short period of time. If we go back to the beginning of the 20th century, right? So we only have to go back 120 years. That's not a long time, right? But people carried gold and silver coins. There was money, specie, and banks. Yes, they would make loans and whatever, but the code of conduct, if you will, which was governing how they could multiply or create money, was very much determined by their possession of this hard, let's call it commodity money, silver, gold. These are commodities. And it comes to mind because there's profound nonsense on Twitter. You'll see my name attached to lots of conversations about the Barney rubble. I'm on mute. It's lame. I suspect there's actually Russian propaganda involved in it. Forgive me, I want to say it's a retail. The people who are conducting these conversations would not be welcome in major global macro hedge fund shops. That's my prejudice. But I'm just not there. I'm not welcoming it. But this notion that actually the ruble has gone back in time and now has the sanctity, has the strength has the honesty and the transparency of being a commodity currency, and somehow that's better than our religious kind of belief in the zeitgeist today of this, be it digital, be it whatever, this money that pervades everywhere. We live in a financial economy. Money is the economy. Now, you won't know, Chris, that in 1933, the American government actually passed, almost like a communist, something you would expect out of China. They passed this decree banning you from actually owning, we call it specie, commodity money. Like if you were found in possession of gold or silver coins, gold coins, you were the US Treasury, the government demanded that you hand in. It's like a gun or something. You can keep the gun, but if you got gold coins, we're gonna find you. You're gonna be in trouble. We're gonna put you in the slammer. I mean, just crazy. What was going on there? I mean, again, this is just how FUCKED the word is by well-intentioned idiots that we call economists. To be called an economist is a slur. Remember, we were having that conversation with Mark Blythe. I was like, okay, the political thing I get, but the economist, how comfortable do you feel like being called an economist? Economists convinced the US administration that this hard commodity money was a threat to the sanctity and the very existence of the American democracy and the economy. And it made no sense. So again, 1933, something was going on. Obviously, there was drama. Johnny Drama was happening. 1933, we had seen the bankruptcy of almost the entirety of the US banking sector. I mean, there are tens of thousands of US banks, and thousands upon thousands of them ceased to exist. You know, I mean, it's hard to imagine, but they ceased to exist. And the stock market fell on the best part of 80%. This is why the concept, it was that hard money, and we got to outlaw it, and created a great myth. Now, actually, it completely gets it wrong, because what was happening was at the beginning of the 20th century, we were getting and it's going to rhyme and take us into Bitcoin. We were getting technological change. The Morse code. We were getting we were doing telegrams. Telegrams. You could call people state to state. Hey, Hank. Don't worry, Hank. I ain't drilling for oil. Don't worry. Your credit's safe with me. But back then, wow, hey, San Francisco, this is New York, and we've got one of your clients, and they happen to be shopping at Saks Fifth Avenue, and they've just presented a check. Are we okay to cash that? Like, can they use this bearer certificate? Like, suddenly this piece of paper from the bank in San Francisco became money. It wasn't a gold coin. It wasn't a silver coin. But when you picked up this newfangled thing, or maybe there was when did Bell invent the telephone? Maybe a decade or so out. But like, maybe you were receiving the telegram, you're going, yeah, Mrs. Simpson, she's a wonderful client. Her credit's great. Go for it. Go for it. She wants to buy pantyhose. Yeah, let her fill up on the pantyhose. And so I'm so stealing from Jeff, and forgive me, Jeff, but I'm flourishing, and his great intellect meets cabaret, and we have the asset capitalist. So he quotes a study, a Federal Reserve study from 1919. So this is 100 years ago, Chris. This is not like there weren't knights in shining armor, 100 years ago, and so banks. You have your vault, that whole, James Bond thing, people rob them and all that stuff, and you open it up, and like I said to you, their lending and their deposits would, like, you go into the vault and you'd see the real stuff. You'd see the commodities, right? You see gold and silver bars and coins. And back then, they had so 1919, I don't know if these numbers, maybe I'll edit this, but they had about $700 million of non-spiritual, real hard commodity, stuff you can touch, stuff that's nothing to do with your imagination. Okay? And from that, they created 8 billion of deposits, which is, that 8 billion is money that they created. Private banks create money, right? Deposits were the creation, but it was the 700 million of commodity money that enabled that to happen. But between 1919 and 1929, the telegram got replaced by the telephone, and this correspondence banking was going on, and people were walking around, and they weren't spending gold coins. They weren't like with a person like Robin Hood and avoid the forest, guys. We might get robbed. They carried a checkbook, and so if you go to June 1929, so like we're so close. June 2008. Banks like, oh, nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about. Same in June 29. Nothing to worry about. And so if you move on. So if you were to climb down all these stairs, to the basement, you have to watch the YouTube to get the significance. And you open the damn vault. Oh, you put it open. The vault cash, like the hard God stuff, right? They had, what did they have? They had like 400 million. They actually had less. Okay. But in the meantime, all of these checks, they had $36 billion of deposits. So in 1919, so 10 years prior, they had just under 2 billion. And in 10 years, 2 billion had gone to 36 billion. Okay. That is a compound growth rate of, it will feature on the screen. I think that compound growth rate will be close to 15%. Let's do that mathematically. Every 5 years, you double. So 19 to 24, 2 becomes 4. 24 to 29, 4 becomes 8. No, I mean, the compound growth rate is something extraordinary. The money compound growth rate must be like 40, 50%. I mean, off the charts. Money printing, right? Yeah. And so I want to say to you that, and the central banks, the Fed, they never saw this. They never understood. This was, the private sector was creating ledger money. And Bitcoin is ledger money. It's a different, we're going to keep that thought. There was an innovation of money. And it took you away from the supervision of the Federal Reserve and the Church of the Almighty. And you could be bonkers. You could be insane. And so you had less gold coins, 700 million of gold and silver coins, and you had 2 billion of deposits. 10 years later, less gold coins, 36 billion of it. Like, so money was spread everywhere, and it funded an amazing foundation of innovation. There was productivity exploding across America, but it also funded excess and speculation, and prices ended up being the wrong price. And markets are just kind of like, something just goes boom. Like Bill was like worth $35 billion one day, and then Bill was worth zero, and he's going to end up like incarcerated. Markets just, they change. Okay. And we had a depression for 20 years and then a global war. And so it was an innovation in money. And yet, the economists like, it was lock up the gold. You take gold away from the people. It was do you see what I mean? They are idiots. People in high public office, people who are in committees advising central banks, they are IDIOTS, right? The only people who make sense in this crazy world are the crazy damn people. Okay, sorry. So you got that? This is going to be a long one.
We've got it. Okay.
So Bitcoin is, like suddenly we got this digital money, right? And it's moving around. Price has gone from nothing to being as high as 70,000, and presently it's 40,000. So let's do let's become Michael Saylor. So the sanctity of Bitcoin is that it's supposedly a better form of gold. Okay, and there's a lot of merit to that statement in that it's portable. Yeah, in that, yes, you can store gold at home, but someone could pinch it. You can't go through an airport with lots of blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Where Michael Saylor's not good on it is he says, well, but its velocity, its goodness, its productivity to the economy is kind of poor because it just sits there and you get zero return on it. It's kind of, yes, it's true. It's kind of not true because you can use it as collateral and people will give you credits. So actually, it can facilitate actually receiving lots of money, which you can then invest in productive goods. And indeed, as we talked about in the 1920s, that was you needed the mainstay of that gold to then have these bank loans. And there's still a lot of credence to that. But his point is, hey, listen, I can set up an app, or I can set up a lending organization, and so I promise to pay you 5% on your you give me custody of your bitcoins, and I'm gonna lend them out. I'm gonna make 15. I'm gonna take a big margin. You're gonna be happy. So he then starts waxing about the value of things. So he's saying actually Bitcoin feels better. So let's say actually Bitcoin is a revolution. So what I'm saying to you, he doesn't say it, but this is my interpretation. I'm fusing Jeff Snyder and Michael Saylor. Within a week, the light bulb in my head came to reveal that Bitcoin is almost 100 years later, Bitcoin is that same revolution. These digital coins are the equivalent of these checks, and they're displacing and they're changing the world. Okay, so if you were to take that to some extreme, you say, well, you don't need gold. The banks demonstrated in the 30s, they went from $700 million of gold to $200 million because they found better things to do. So maybe gold is no longer relevant in a world where we have Bitcoin. So you come to, what should the price of Bitcoin be? So Bitcoin and gold and dollars, you can't use this term value. It has no valuation. The price is whatever, but actually there is some construct to it. The price is what's necessary to affix to the kind of fixed quantity that exists in the world. So for gold, we know, I want to say, if I take the median of all the estimates that I've read, about 200,000 metric tons of gold has been extracted from the planet in what we call civilization, right? 200,000 tons.
Yeah, that's what I saw
and we
too,
know that there are
earlier,
32,000 ounces in one of those metric tons. And we know that, let's approximate that the price of a metric ounce of gold today is $2,000. Yeah. And so the value accorded, or the value, the size, the monetary metric, the totality of gold today, I want to say that would be about $12.8 trillion US. And everyone can do their sums. You have to be good at dealing with lots of zeros, as you intimated. So if gold was to be made extinct, that we didn't need it, then because we had Bitcoin, it was superior. Then you would say that actually Bitcoin, so gold is that size because of all of the utility that it provides. It provides a safekeeping custodial thing. People feel secure in their ownership. And so you know that there will be no more than 21 million Bitcoins ever produced. And so you've got to say, well, if we know that, and we know that to replace gold, then these 21 million Bitcoins have to have a value the same as gold. So you divide 13 trillion by 21 million. And you get you then get, so the price of Bitcoin, if Bitcoin eliminates gold, the price of Bitcoin would be
13 trillion divided by 21 million is 619,000.
So that's to say the present price of Bitcoin. So this is the sailor argument. He said, hey, look, you should be buying it today. You can buy it for 40,000. It's going to take out gold. And therefore that value, that price will have to rise to 620,000, right? Which would be 4 into 62. You know, that would be, you're going to make 16 times your money from here to there. So that's how people play. Now, against that, gold has thousands and thousands of years of delivery. You know, gold in gold we have trust. Okay. Secondly, technology. Like I had lunch with someone on Saturday who someone I trust and respect and money making. He said, you know, cannot rule out that within 5 years there will be code breaks. That so far, Bitcoin has been robust, has this very strong moat, protective moat, and no one's been able to crack the system. But you can't say that someone will not. Like, you know, Bitcoin today is 0.8 trillion US dollars. So we're saying 0.8 has to grow into a size of 13 trillion. No one's been able to hack $1 trillion, but as the valuation goes up, the intensification of people trying to break the code will only get greater. And so that's a profound risk factor. But that's how you can kind of frame a reference around where Bitcoin can trade. I kind of feel being a bit of an ass. I've certainly been an ass with uranium, and I felt that I wanted to buy like some of the uranium stocks lower. That's been an error. You should have anyone in I can't say it's an investment recommendation, or they'll put me in prison with Bill. But if I had capital, I would have money in uranium, I'd have money in gold, and I'd have like a tiny amount of money in Bitcoin. I think it would go lower, but I can't rule out that it doesn't go up like 15 times from today. And then Sailor kind of plays on the notion, well, but actually, because gold is so redundant and it, like as a wealthy family, you don't earn anything from it. That's why actually people have an allocation to commercial property. Yes, there are property taxes, but you know, a good commercial property is going to deliver you a good commercial return and good income. Okay, and again, this is the mania which has taken over China and reached maybe absurd levels. But you know, so actually, if you can farm out and make money from Bitcoin, then you don't need commercial property, and this is when it gets absurd, right? So he says, well, hey, the size of the commercial property market is $100 trillion. So then take 100 trillion divided by 21 million, but that's way too absurd, and then finally, the truly exciting thing about Bitcoin. So what banks did actually, when they created this correspondence banking network between banks, they took out the government, they took out the Federal Reserve. This is why the Federal Reserve is doing vandalism and damage to our world, because it doesn't understand, because the banks are operating over here. Like, no one wants to play in the devil's playground, the devil being the Fed. Like they've developed a coexistence, but they've parked the commercial brains well away from the Federal Reserve, which befuddles the Federal Reserve. It's why they keep making errors. That was further driven by the development of the euro-dollar credit market. That was just getting more and more distance from the crazy Feds. And so you just see, ever since the 1970s, profound policy errors, because these people are not watching. They're not watching real banking. Now, finally, thought bubble, the intoxication of Bitcoin is actually that you don't need a bank. You don't need the vault of the bank, and you don't need the bank manager to make the loans and to make the deposits. That you can do it with a digital currency and with an application and with all these protocols. So maybe in the future, so we started with kings who used God's money, and then the kings became corrupt and they diluted gold and they put lots of kind of rubbish in it, and that was called inflation. We
Yeah.
then created banks, which were governed by government by public policy, and their activity was restricted and tailored to their ownership of gold, which was in a fixed supply, and so their behavior was bounded. And then the banks escaped that via the checking correspondence system. They continued to escape that with the eurodollar system. In escaping it and having a reserve-less banking system, they generated too much money. Just like in the 20s, they generated too much money and they created the devastation of a depression and a world war. In the 70s, when it really got going, they created the once-in-a-lifetime inflation of the 1970s that we all fear today, and it was a function of that innovation. And now today, we're in another 20-year depression, and the next step probably, having taken kings out of the money-making function, having taken governments out of the money-making function, thought bubble is, are we about to take banks out of the money-making function? Chris, I'm done.
It's been a masterclass, people. He has absolutely outdone himself. The acid capitalist has been on fire this week. But there's two things outstanding. First of all, I asked everybody, 100 trillion divided by 21 million, what is the answer? I feel as though I've got to contribute something, so it is 4.7 or 4.8 million if you round up. So there you go, at least you know that. And we will finish with a little quote from the Funk Dubiist about what is money, because Hugh was asking me this whole episode's about what is money. As they say, the gods keep on praying, saviors ain't saving nobody's soul yet, the devil keeps playing. If your soul loves the spun, money rock on. Money rock on, money rock on.
Wonderful.